welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. My name is Brian Perez, and we are here live on this Thursday, the 21st of November. We'd love to chat with you. We might open up the phone lines a little bit later, so get those questions ready. I'll give you the phone number then, although if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram Live, you can see that number there on the bottom of the screen. But if you call right now, you'll just get a busy signal. There's other ways to get your question to us, which I'll talk about later as well. But first, I want to introduce who's on the panel today. We've got Brian Broderson, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and a very special guest, the California kid himself, Pastor Joey Buran. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys. Stoked to be here.
Stoked.
Right? What else would you
We know
expect?
he's a pro surfer if he says stoked. That's just part with it. Yeah.
So I was telling Joey earlier about your little text to me the other day about what are we going to do on Thursday? Bobby's out, Phil's out. And I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. We'll figure it out. And then, Joey sent me the text and I thought, oh, perfect.
That's the answer.
Because I've been wanting to, we've kind of played a little phone tag, wanted to kind of catch up. It's been a while since we've seen each other. And then I thought, you were talking about, maybe doing a radio thing. I thought, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I know. Well, I was saying we could do it after Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, JP, how about this Thursday? I'm like, I'm so there. Let's do it.
Yeah. So it's great to have you. And we're going to talk about your book today. But before we do that, we have been friends for decades.
Yes.
Very close friends, I'd say, even though we live a few miles from each other, and we probably saw each other more when we lived thousands of miles from each other.
Probably. I went to England and visited you.
Yeah, it's kind of the way it works, But, just yesterday, I told you that I ran into an old friend of ours yesterday, and there was a group of guys. There was a guy from South Africa and his son. There was a guy from Costa Rica and his wife and kids, and a couple of guys from Britain, all surfer guys, and they're talking about surfing. And so, of course, your name came up, and we were talking about that, and then, one thing led to another, and somehow I was telling him how we met.
Right.
And I said, it was a funny thing. I said, of course, I knew about Joey for years. And I think George said something like, he kind of forgot you were from Carlsbad somehow, and so, because I said it was, Vista, Oceanside, Carlsbad. Oh, okay, Joey. Yeah. And I said, yeah, so, one morning, went down to a little place called State Beach, offshore surf shop, and waves were fun. Nobody was out. And basically, Joey and I just ended up out in the water together. And we ended up talking. And, you probably remember this because you have a good memory, but, you said something came up and I mentioned I was a Christian. I told you I went to Calvary Chapel.
Right.
I didn't tell you anything beyond that. And then you went into, oh gosh, I love your pastor. I listened to him on the radio. And I said, okay, well, time out. I'm the guy. So.
Yeah, it was pretty classic because normally it's actually, that story's in the book. And, when you do a memoir, and my memoir is Beyond the Dream, there's a lot of things that don't make it out of the editing room, right? Yeah. Just like when you're producing a CD or something, just certain things don't make it. Yeah. But that story had to make it because that was such an important day in my life in August of '87. And it's funny because as you get older, there's certain things you remember in absolute detail, and there's things your mind chooses not to remember because they're not significant. Yeah. And for me, I remember the details of that day so clearly. And a couple of the details are, one, the surf was really good. It was good. It was above average. Yeah. And it was marine layer, but it was really good surf. And it was like 4 feet, and it wasn't crowded. And that's where everyone went to. It's like the schoolyard hoop where all the NBA and Division I guys play at. Yeah. And no one was out, and you were out, and I paddled out. And I thought, it's really odd. There's no one out but this guy over here. And then you caught a wave, and you're a good surfer, and above average for sure. People need to know that. You're pretty good.
I was going to say, did everybody hear that? Joey Buran is called Brian.
That's my favorite sentence in the book, to be honest with you.
Brian rips. Brian's one of those Huntington guys from the 70s at the pier, and he ripped. And Brian ripped when he was younger, and he ripped, and he still rips if he really wanted to do that, if that's what his life purpose was. Well, this guy's a pretty good surfer. And then that conversation happened that way. And I just remember being like, wow, like I've been listening to him on the radio. This is like when Chuck Colson or Charles Stanley and these guys, whatever. It was the K-Wave it was K-Wave in the 80s, and Chuck was on, and Manna for Today, and Greg Laurie's program. But Brian, I had a connection with Brian's teaching. Brian's teachings with Back to Basics really ministered to me. But what's interesting is when I was talking to him, I didn't recognize his voice from the radio, but as soon as he said it was him, I'm like, of course, it's the guy. And we had a great conversation. But what ended up happening that day is Brian Broderson invited me to the church. Calvary Vista was off Hacienda Boulevard at that time, off the 78. And then I drove by there and I met him, and he gave me 2 VHS videos. One was Chuck's Survival 2000, like one of those prophetic type of videos Chuck did. And the other was Raul Reese's Ferry to Freedom.
Wow.
And I went home and I watched them both. And I said, I really like this guy. I like what he has in his library. And I'm going to start going to Calvary Chapel Vista, because before that I was going down in Encinitas. And so that's why I made the big pivot switch and started going to Calvary Vista. And what's really fond memories of that time is Brian made time for me. See, now in this generation, they talk about get together with the pastor for coffee, meet the staff for coffee. Like, we were doing that before we even knew what it was. Like, I'm like, Brian, I got questions about like dinosaurs and the end of the world. And Brian's like, well, let's go surfing and let's go to breakfast. And that's what we did. And we go surfing, and then I would have a list of questions as I was reading through my Bible that I would run by Brian. He's like, well, there's this and there's that. And I found peace, I found answers, because he is the answer man. I found answers and I found peace, and we just developed a great friendship. So Thank you, Brian. And that was the autumn of 1987. I was still a pro surfer, and I was a young believer.
And I knew, just intuitively from the Spirit, that God's hand was on you for more than surfing and more than just, surf evangelism, And so there came a point where I said, hey, you want to come and join us on the staff here? And you're like, why? What am I going to do?
This is another one of my favorite stories, Brian, because that's the same month, that's October of 87. It's the same month that there was fall in ministry for some of the ministry leaders. And so when I was watching TV on the news, like Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, they're all making fun of Christian leaders, Jim Baker and others, Jimmy Swaggart, that had fallen in ministry that month. So they were the news. And as I'd watch the news, I felt like the devil's like going, that's going to be you. You cannot be a pastor because you fail at everything. And of course we all fail. That's the reality of life. That's how you get to success, is through trial and error failures. But I didn't think that way at the time. So Brian, you asked me to come on staff in early October. And I said no.
Yeah. No, I remember.
Absolutely no.
Very resistant.
And I was going to junior college at Miracosta at the time, and I was training for the first pro event on the new tour, the U.S. tour. And I still was capable of winning, making finals, making money. I was still relevant that way. Well, I went to Santa Cruz, San Francisco, Santa Cruz area, and the contest was 15 feet at Ocean Beach, which is a terrifying wave. It's a treacherous wave, open ocean, sharks, everything you don't like about something like that, cold water. It was Halloween day, and I almost drowned. First event of the new year, I almost drowned. Then we went to a small church in Pacifica that night. It's Halloween night. It's easy to remember, 1987. And Mark Spitzbergen and Mark Hartman were making a new Christian surf movie called Sunriders. No one even knew what that was. I had no idea what they were doing, but I knew they were coming to film this event. So I show up at this little church, super disappointed by being knocked out in the first round. But I'm kind of surprised, like about 80 to 100 people came to hear me on Halloween night at a small church. I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And I just told surf stories. And back then, my testimony was like, don't do drugs. God loves you. Make good choices. I was just reading through the Bible, and when I was getting strong, I had mentioned Jesus more at that time. So what happened is the night was very successful, and it impacted me. So the next day, I'm driving home from Santa Cruz, cut over at Paso Robles, over to the 5, right about Button Willow. I'm listening to Greg Laurie cassette tapes. There's a 6-tape series that Brian gave me, How to Be Used by God. Tape number 3 was Forgiven and Used, about Peter's failure in denying the Lord. I'm listening to that tape. When it's done, I remember it was by Button Willow. I can still remember it. I felt like the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart. Joey, failure is inevitable, but growth is optional. You need to have faith. You need to trust me. And I knew there on the 5, right about Button Willow, that I was called to be a pastor. That was November 1st. I called Brian the next day, and I said, I'm terrified. It's a bold step into the unknown. I haven't even read my Bible through once, but I'm going for it. I'm all in. And so that all happened in about a 3-month period where we met in the water in August. You discipled me and spent time with me. And then you said, be a pastor. I'm like, no way. And then that's It was November 2nd where I was at peace in my heart, and I communicated November 2nd. And then by early 1988, the church was moving to the new facility, 885 East Vista Way, where Rob Salvato is now.
Right.
And I was a part of a whole new beginning with the church, too. It was an incredibly wonderful time, and I'm super grateful for it.
You know, one thing I remember very vividly is there was a point, and, you know, the movie got made, the Surf Riders.
Yes.
Is that
Sunriders.
Sunriders got made, yeah. And you were going around, you know, speaking, the movie was showing and stuff. And I remember you said to me at one point, you said, you know what, I'm tired of the Joey Baran story. I need to know the Jesus story. I want to really dig in and study the Bible. I want to know what the Bible says. And well,
there it is.
Mike
the image
Lambrisi,
of Sunriders right here. I'm looking at it here in the studio. Fantastic.
Sunriders.com.
So that was I just remember that moment of like, yeah, let's do this. You know, let's.
This was my baptism into ministry in 1988 with my wife Jennifer. As you recall, I had met Jennifer during this same time period.
Yep.
My wife of 37 years, and we met at community college, and I courted her, and she went forward at your invitation, December 7th at the Hacienda Church.
Wow.
I asked her to marry me by December 29th.
Yep.
We were married March 12th, and I went on staff with you. So God gave me my beautiful wife and my calling, and you as my friend, and Gaylord Tohill as my boss, all in that period. And at the same time, Sunriders was done. And it's worth noting, very important to give props to Mark Spitzbergen and Mark Hartman. Sunriders has never been equaled. You know, we did Wave of Life. And Brian Jennings, of course, with Walking on Water, did phenomenal Christian evangelism movies. But the impact of Sunriders, as you and I both know, was millions of people. And here's a little backdrop to this story that most people don't know, is when I won the Pipeline Masters in 1984, that was the first year it wasn't on Wide World of Sports. Mm-hmm. That was when everything was going to VHS video and cable TV was just starting to come in. MTV's first year, I believe, was 1984 as well. Mm. And what happened was with that Pipeline Masters, it didn't go on national TV, but that VHS was the first surfing VHS the sport of surfing had. And that VHS went out worldwide and was seen by innumerable people all over the planet. The 84 Pipe Masters. So for 3 years, everyone watched me win the Pipe Masters over and over and over. And then Sunriders came out just a few years later. And in Sunriders, I had the testimony that all is insecure, all is vain without faith in Jesus Christ. And so many people tell me, Joey, we saw you win the Pipe Masters in this video. And 3 years later, we saw you say Jesus is your fulfillment, not the Pipe Masters, in this video. And it brought us to saving faith.
Yeah.
So these two events, winning the Pipe Masters in 84 and then going out with Sunriders in 88, they go together for a 1-2 effect that is really unequaled for that timeline with surfing, the sport of surfing, and the body of Christ, the Calvary Chapel movement. But you're right. I do remember in the latter part of that year, I was like, I'm just tired of getting up and talking about surfing. I want to get to Jesus. I want to teach the Bible and go deeper. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing me how to do that.
Well, you're welcome. It was a delight to be able to do that, you know, and you know, like you said, I mean, it was so natural because it was just in the context of a friendship that God developed with us, and you know, we had plenty of fun surf sessions, and you know, we could do two things at one time.
It was great. Gaylord didn't like it. Pastor Gaylord was your associate pastor, and what a special role he had in my life because everything was about Joey Baran up to that point, and Gaylord made sure it was not about Joey Baran at that point.
That's the second time this week we've mentioned Gaylord on this program.
I love Gaylord. Of course, he's in eternity and in glory, but he had a very special place in my life, and he tried to give me good insights, life principles, being a businessman that he was.
Sure, yeah.
And if I had heeded them, I would have saved myself certain troubles in ministry with church planning.
Yeah.
But now at 63, I can look back and just reflect on just the value of his role in my life. And we would say good cop, bad cop, in a sense. You're the good cop, he's the bad cop. But someone had to tell Joey Baran, like someone had to really help Joey Baran. And in the end, I got sent to Vermont for a year to work for minimum wage, pick up dirty dishes, and be bossed around by everybody, including dishwashers, to realize he who's the greatest in the kingdom is the servant of all. Gaylord tried to help me, though, early on.
Yeah, well, he did. He was amazing, absolutely. Yeah, I was talking to somebody. Was that on here? We were talking about Gaylord. You know, he was a stickler for law. So if Gaylord would often say, I'm going to go speak somewhere. Hey, I'll drive you. And I'm like, well, can we go like more than 55 miles an hour? Because, I want to get there a little quicker. Gaylord's like, no, we're going to, we're in the slow
Gaylord,
lane.
that yellow car going 55 miles an hour on the 78.
Yeah, he would not go 55 and a half. He would not go,
I was a stickler for breaking the law.
Yes.
So it was a good fit.
Well, I was with you a little bit more on that.
We're 70s surfers.
Yeah, Huntington Beach, 70 surfer, breaking the law was just kind of part of what you did.
Yeah.
So.
If you've just joined us, you're listening to Pastor's Perspective. I'm Brian Perez, sitting here in the room with two old friends, and it is just wonderful hearing their stories. Pastor Brian Broderson and Pastor Joey Baran, the pro surfer, whose new book is called Beyond the Dream. Hold it up to the camera there, Joey.
There it is.
There it is, Beyond the Dream. It's available for purchase at joeybaran.com. Baran is spelled B-U-R-A-N, B-U-R-A-N, joeybaran.com. It's also available for purchase at the Chapel Store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
And on Amazon, so you can get it on Amazon as well.
What about like Audible? Are you going to do the audio book for that?
We're looking to do that in 2025.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
That's a challenge. I know a lot of people, and Cheryl has actually done an Audible book, and I'm thinking, I don't think I could ever do that. I don't think I could really have the patience to sit through that. But Joey, so let's talk about the book. Of course, you reached out to Cheryl and asked if she would read it over and give you an endorsement, and she happily did that. But it was so funny in the aftermath because she's just telling me, like, Brian, this book is for surfers. This is all for surfers. She said, luckily, being married to you, I kind of knew some of this stuff.
Right.
But she said for like a non-surfer, I mean, this is all technical surf people and, jargon and everything. And I said, well, of course it is. I mean, what else would it be?
Well, as Brian Perez said, first thing he said is the California kid. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am who I am. Right?
Yeah.
Deion Sanders is Deion Sanders and Joey Brand is Joey Brand. I am who I am. And I have had a few people go like, well, it's really written with a lot of surf history. I'm like, well, because I'm a Hall of Fame pro surfer. That's kind of my memoir. It's going to, and an Olympic coach, it's going to be there. But I will say this, as I've gone out and done events at different churches, Surf Museum, and I got other ones coming up, you find a lot of people saying, I'm buying these books for all my surf friends. My brother's 55, he doesn't know the Lord, and you were his hero, your posters are on his wall. That kind of stuff comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And people buy like 3-4 copies. There's a guy in my neighborhood, he buys like 10 every so often. He's got all these Huntington surf friends. He goes, I just keep giving them away.
That's
and
amazing.
You miss all the shots you don't take. So we're just sowing the seed and see what happens. Because if you were from that timeline, these are powerful stories of it's my memoir, but my memoir is interwoven with the birth of modern pro surfing and extreme sports, which are now Olympic sports.
Yeah.
So in 1976, when I had the dream of being a pro surfer there at Carlsbad High, there was not a pro surf tour yet. And so my career began in 78 and went to its pinnacle in 84, winning the Pipe Masters. And Bob Hurley, of course, who founded Hurley International and was the founder of Billabong United States before that, he read the book, loved the book, and he said, Joey, you took me back in time with incredible stories. And he said, essentially, your career spanned an era when this industry, the sport of surfing, was about $1 million net worth in the mid-'70s to $1 billion industry by the time you retired. And I was a California kid and the poster child of American pro surfing in that entire time. So that's the birth again of VHS, cable TV, eventually the surf channels and ESPN. It was all happening at the same time. And now we see surfing in the Olympics. Now we see skateboarding in the Olympics. And I was able to be on the spearhead of all that.
Yeah.
Or tip of the spear.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the story. But you see, here's the key. There's the dream. And Joey Brand had a dream. And this was really important to understand because I ask people all the time when I'm signing books. When I see younger people, I say, first of all, I always write for them, always a future and a hope. Because it's super important the next generation knows there's always a future and a hope. Because Jesus is the same today, yesterday, today, and forever. So all the promises are yes and amen. They don't change. So I'm not, as you know, hardly anything. I'm anything but a doom and gloomer, right? So when I see them, I always want to tell them, like, what's your dream? I ask them, what's your dream? And very few people really know what their dream is when they're younger or even in college. They're trying to find their dream. Joey Brand knew his dream at the age of 12. When I saw Jerry Lopez win the Pipe Masters on Wire World of Sports in 1973, I turned to my mom and I said, I'm going to win that contest. I had absolute life purpose from the age of 12 to 24 when I won the Pipe Masters. And everything I did on the Pro Tour, everything I ate, slept, drank, dreamed, thought of, every surf movie with Jerry Lopez in it, everything I ever did was moving toward this pinnacle to be the best surfer in the world, at the best wave in the world, in the best contest in the world, and be king of the pipeline. And I did it with 4 world champions in the final. And so that's why when you see the video clips of me winning the Pipe Masters, I say, dreams come true. But that's the essence of my story, because everyone can relate to a dream and everyone wants to be a dreamer and have a big dream. At some point they find it, or they at least admire someone else who goes for it and has a dream. Well, it was after the dream, as you know the story, when I won the Pipe Masters. Maybe Brian Perez, you don't know, but I'm the center of attention, all the TV cameras, and they come over. I go back to my 3 boards, I'm doing interviews, and this rainstorm came through. A really hard, not a light Hawaiian rain, I mean a torrential, pull your car over on the road, Cam Highway rainstorm, and everyone left. So they come over, this Hawaiian guy works for the organization of the event, he said, you got to give the trophy back. No, it's not a big deal, but when you win the Masters in golf, you want your green jacket. Mm-hmm. There's just certain things like, no, it's like I won Wimbledon. This is my Wimbledon Cup. That's Pipe Masters trophy. That's my Pipe Masters trophy. And so the Hawaiian guy comes up, oh, hey, brother, it's my trophy. Get the trophy back. So I take my trophy back. I'm a little bit in shock. And the rain comes down. And there was a moment where I'm there at Pipeline. I'm looking at the ocean. The surf is still like 15 to 20 feet. And there's no one around me. And it's starting to get dark. It's later in the afternoon. It's December 17th, 1984, almost 40 years ago, where I was completely alone with my 3 surfboards that I had that day. And I was completely alone. And up until that point in my life, I had never felt this sense of aloneness and isolation in the universe. Wow. And the presence of God in that moment. So just 15 minutes before, my entire life was fulfilled in proclaiming dreams come true. And here in this next moment, in this darkness, with the trophy taken away in a driving rainstorm, I'm alone with my 3 surfboards thinking, this is it? Mm. This is it? And I can honestly say from that moment on, I never needed to win another Pipe Masters or anything like that. I was like the woman at the well. You drink from this water, you'll thirst again. Like, it was one of the 5 greatest contests of the last century, ranked by Surfing Magazine. To this day, it's still considered one of the greatest events of all time. Matt Warshaw, the famous surf historian, said this: Joey Brand did slew the dragon, and we were in awe. Mm. The California kid lived his dream, and every California won. It's like if the Chargers win the Super Bowl, everyone ever cheered for the Chargers for the last 50 years is going to feel like they won the Super Bowl. Yeah. And Joey Brand was that for California surfers, because as Brian knows, at that time, the sport was dominated by Australians and Hawaiians. So when the California kid won the pipeline, and by the way, only one other California has won it since then in 40 years, Rob Machado. Kern won a world title the next year, and no other California male has ever won a world title ever since. It was a very unique time in pro surfing history for Californians, but I just knew there had to be more, and that's why the book's called Beyond the Dream, because then began the 3-year journey of bottoming out, reaching out with my Catholic background, believing in God, but not willing to surrender to God, not really having a personal faith, not understanding saved by grace, understanding Jesus is the Son of God, but not how I get saved by Jesus. All those things had to happen, and once they did, I was a pastor at Calvary Chapel Vista.
How cool.
Yeah.
It's really amazing when you think about that, like that moment, that 15-minute span of time, how God used that 15 minutes to just completely flip your whole world upside down and put you on a completely different trajectory. Like,
it was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, that is like a providential, sovereign act of God's grace, because you could have just, no, I got to go on to the next. You could have gone in different directions.
I could have gone
obviously.
Kelly Slater and let's win 7 more or something, or Tom Carroll with 3. Like, I just knew that was this. My whole life it needed a complete reset because I had fulfilled that dream at 24, and there had to be something way more than this to life. And that's where I really bottomed out, because I just couldn't see, for 3 years, I couldn't find a purpose for living. I started the U.S. Pro Surfing Tour, various other things in my life. I was still hanging on as the California kid, but it all was empty because I had all that notoriety. I was the highest paid pro surfer in the world at one time. I go to Dodger games and people want my autograph, and I worked with K-Rock and 91X. And it was just so empty. And the farther I got into the 80s, 85, 86, it was just so empty. And I was just trying to find a purpose, and I couldn't find it. And I didn't find it until I walked in North Coast Calvary in early 87 and sat in the front row instead of the back row, and the Holy Spirit touched my life.
But you mentioned a minute ago, and you know, it's one of my favorite texts, and I use it for my own story as well. But if you drink this water, you'll thirst again. So the context of that, John chapter 4, there's this woman who comes. She's a Samaritan, so culturally, her and Jesus they're not even supposed to be having a conversation according to the culture, because she's a Samaritan, he's a Jew, she's a woman, which is another dimension to the thing, and you know, Jesus, there's a well, right? It's Jacob's well in the center of this place called Sychar, and she comes, and Jesus is there, and he says, give me something to drink. And she's like, what are you doing talking to me or asking me for something to drink? You know, that we don't do that. You know, culturally, we don't even talk to each other. And Jesus says, you know, if you knew who it was who was asking you for a drink, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. Oh, man. I just love that. Every time I read that story.
And that's what Joey Brand did not have. I had religion. I had a trophy for a few moments. I had a pipe master's title, but I did not have living water.
Yeah, and the woman's, she's just thinking about this well, and how are you going to get this water out of the well, and all of this stuff. And that's where Jesus says, if you drink this water, you will thirst again. Well, he's talking, yes, about the water in the well, but he's talking about something way bigger. He's talking about anything and everything that life can offer you. If you drink it to the deepest, if you drink it to the fullest, if you drink it to the winning the pipe masters, you'll thirst again. But if you drink the water that I will give you, you will never thirst.
Yeah, and that's what happened.
That's what happened.
That was the beginning of a 3-year journey to get to a place of understanding grace and receiving Christ personally.
But, you know, Joey, there's people right now listening to us who, obviously in a different context, but in a similar kind of a situation, they're experiencing like, I'm still thirsty. Wait, I thought that one thing, I thought that sale, or I thought that you know, I scored on this, or I got that thing, or this, she loves me, or, you know, but there's something missing.
There is, and the bottom line is we're all created, all things are made by Christ and for Christ, and Him all things consist. So we're going to always be empty until we are yielded to Christ and fulfilling His plan. We're not saved by works, but we're saved to His workmanship, and that work of art we're meant to be with all of our gifts and talents and interests in the timeline of our life that God's given us. I find it quite easy to understand that Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Life, is the #1 selling book of our lifetime, because just the title itself reminds people that their life has a purpose. So for me, what I try to impart to people, like you say, listeners right now, is every life matters. Every life has value. Christ died for everyone, and there's that potential to be that. There's a potential where I never see anyone who don't see a potential work of art, what they're meant to be with the Lord, under the grace and the power of the Holy Spirit through saving faith in Jesus. And that's what I'd just like to say right now, is that every life has meaning and purpose, and we're created in His image and in His glory, but we're not fruitful for His purposes, and we don't have eternal fruit, and we don't have eternity and glory until we come to Christ. For as many as received Him, to them He gave the right to become the children of God, not born of flesh, not born of blood, not born of men, but born of God.
Yeah. And I think right now, I've had a number of conversations with people about this, and you know, there's all different kinds of opinions and views about this and that and the other thing, and you know, what's right and what's wrong and all of this. The one common thread, though, that I think runs through every single human being is the thread of this idea of purpose. Why am I here? What is the meaning of my life? And I think if you're an atheist, if you're religious, it doesn't matter, because we've all got that thread that runs right through there.
He's put eternity in our heart.
He has.
You're listening to Pastor's Perspective, and our special guest today is Pastor Joey Buran from Worship Generation Church in Fountain Valley. Yes, the same Joey Buran who won all those awards way back when. And we're going to open up the phone lines if you have questions specifically for Joey. You can find out more about his book and purchase it at joeyburan.com. It's also available on Amazon and here at the chapel store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. More information about his church in Fountain Valley is at worshipgeneration.com. We'll be right back, 888-564-6173. Hey, we're back on Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. I'm Brian Perez, here with Pastor Brian Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and our very special guest, Pastor Joey Buran from Worship Generation Church in Fountain Valley, California. You hear Joey all weekend long here on K-Wave. We've got him on like 3 or 4 times, and you can get our program schedule on kwave.com. If you want information about Joey or his book, go to joeyburan.com. Worshipgeneration.com is his church's website. You can also buy the book on Amazon or here at the chapel store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. The name of the book is Beyond the Dream. And really quick question about that, Joey. You mentioned in the first half of the program that there's a lot of kids and even, college-age people who don't know what their dream is.
Right.
I wonder, there's probably people who do know what their dream is. They have a dream. They know what they want to do for the rest of their life, but they're afraid.
Yes.
They're either afraid of rejection or of failure or of even admitting that, hey, I want to do this, but then they're afraid somebody will come along and say, you'll never do that. Who do you think you are? Just go work in your dad's office or something or whatever. And it's just like, and they're sitting there. Time goes by, they turn 30, 40, 50, 60, and they're like, I never actually fulfilled that dream that I wanted to fulfill. What do you tell them?
I tell them you got to go for it. I tell them there's never enough money to get married, there's never enough money to have kids, and there's never enough money to step out in faith. So you better just decide you're going to go for all 3 as the Lord leads you. You just got to go for it. Life is not for the faint of heart. Life is an adventure. There's risk in crossing the street. If you lived in the same place for 30 years and did the same job, 10-year job for 30 years, your world would still all change around you. Just look at the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. Life is to be lived. It's an adventure. I don't fear failure, and I don't fear success. I fear not giving it the attempt or the effort, especially my best effort. So I would just tell young people all the time, you got to go for it. Wayne Gretzky, you miss all the shots you don't take. You just got to go for it. Yeah. We all start out, anything you do, you're in the bottom 10%. You do it for 7 years, statistics show you'll be in the top 10%. So 7 years, all in. Success leaves a trail. Figure out what they did. Follow it. Get after it. Put Jesus in front of it, behind it, above it, beneath you, and go big in Jesus' name.
Joey, I've told
we could end the program right there.
I've told Joey this often too. If Joey had not been who he was, he could have been a sports historian and one of the greatest sports commentators of all time, because he's a walking sports index. Any sport. That's the crazy thing. And, the funny thing about that, Joey, from the time we first met, I just thought, you were not like most surfers. Most surfers had never touched a football or threw a baseball or any of that. I mean, it's changed now, but back in those days, in the 70s,
I just am who I am. That's the uniqueness of all of us.
It is. It's great.
Yeah, Jim Kempton, the publisher of Surfer Magazine, when he reviewed my book, he has a couple best-selling books. He said, this is not a typical book written by a surfer. He just said, this is great. It's super inspirational. You'll love it. And that's been encouraging to me, because these are non-faith-based people.
Yeah.
The entire surf industry just said the book's, it's 10, 5 stars. It's fantastic, which is really cool, because that's my peer group.
Yeah.
And the faith is there. So,
yeah. So I have one question about that, and then we're going to go to a couple of other things. Has Sean Thompson gotten a copy of the book?
No, he has not.
Okay,
but he did endorse the book.
You need to get him a copy.
Well, he got an ARC, an Advanced Reviews copy, yes, cool. And he gave a solid, but I haven't given him the Joey Brand signed copy
You got to get him one. Yeah.
He's like my big brother.
Because I somehow ended up following him on Instagram, and I'm just like, every time I see his stuff, I'm like, Sean, you need to be fulfilled in your Jewishness.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I love Sean. I'm always a little intimidated by him, because in the pro surfing world, he was the world champion, pipe master. Sean Thompson tilts the room.
Yeah.
He tilts the room. He's a sought-after motivational speaker. He's been on Good Morning America and all that stuff. Yeah. And when I was with Team O'Neill, he was the guy, and I was the bridesmaid. So I've always had this thing with Sean Thompson. There's old ads where I'm like staring at him, like, Joey, look ahead. I'm looking at Sean Thompson, like, I'm going to take you down. But we have a great relationship, and he did endorse the book, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Okay, so I want to go back to the story a little bit, to your story. So you come with me. You joined our staff at Calvary Vista, for some years. We're serving the Lord together. And then, God starts stirring your heart. And you mentioned already Vermont, but you ended up going to Virginia Beach.
Yes.
And church planting in Virginia Beach. And, of course, we were involved in all of that together. And so you... Virginia Beach, you still kind of had the surf connection. But then when you moved to Burlington, Vermont, I mean, you were... Wow. You were just like, talk about being under the radar, off the map. You were all of those things.
Yes.
But then you came back to California. So just walk us through that really quick.
Well, Greg Cruz, who you know well from the Huntington days, he was my boss with USA Olympic Surfing, and he's a Christian, a wonderful man of God. He read my book, and he said, Joey, one thing I saw in your book is that God moved you around a lot. And he goes, as I read the book, I realized you were learning lessons at each stage and each place.
Yeah.
Almost like a video game. At each level, you're learning something new. And Vermont was perhaps the most important year of my life for this one key lesson, is the value of one's soul. Mm. Because in Virginia Beach, as you know, the church was about 300-400 people. It was thriving. We had Chuck on the radio. We tagged his spot. You were on the radio. People came listening to you on the radio. And it was a religious area. It was like... Caesarea, on the Sea of Galilee. All the rabbis were there, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it was a religious town, 500,000 people, religious area, and we were thriving. When we went to Vermont, it was like going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Mm-hmm. There was no doctrinal discussions with anybody in Burlington. There was nothing to discuss. They were not interested in religious conversations. They had little or no theology. It was a dark place. Mm-hmm. It was very oppressive, and God called us there, and he confirmed us to go there. And there in Vermont, I worked, I was 34 years of age. I worked in room service for $4.40 an hour. That was minimum wage. And it's the lowest spot, because actually dishwashers are usually the lowest spot, but room service kind of works for dishwashers because we got to get them the dirty dishes so they can go home at 1 a.m. So it really was the lowest place in the the realm of a workforce. Plus, the housemaids were Eastern European women, and they spoke like Czech, different Slavic languages, and they would tell me what to do. And so God took me from, in a 7-year period, from being the California kid to $4.40 an hour, the lowest guy in this Sheraton hotel there in Vermont. And I'd pick up dirty dishes and put them on the rack, and the Lord's like, servant of all, servant of all, servant of all. This advanced Gaylord Tohill advanced 202, right? And then one day I was going to work in this dishwasher. Since there wasn't really a church to pray for, there was less, like a couple dozen people, which is important, but I pray for them. But then I pray for all my coworkers at the church. And this guy, Owen, the dishwasher, was coming down the stairs, and I said, "How you doing, Owen?" He goes, "Not that good. I'm super depressed, and I don't really have a reason to live." And we're talking about purpose. I said, "Owen, would you like to get together for lunch?" And a few days later, we did. And he received Christ, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And about 3 months later, we left Vermont. We ran out of money. We just couldn't do it. It wasn't doable. God called us back to California. The church thrived for years, many years after that. But driving back across country with my kids and our possessions from 6-7 years of East Coast experience, a lot of time to reflect. And I realized probably the greatest experience of the East Coast lesson was the value of a soul. And that's really important, because in ministry, sometimes you get up somewhere to speak and you see 200 empty chairs and 40 chairs with people, but you only see the empty chairs. And up to that time, I tend to see who wasn't there or what God wasn't doing. And after Owen the dishwasher, I realized the value of one. And it's a real blessing, because ever since then, I focus on the value of one and who is there as opposed to who's not there. And that's really important. I'm focusing on what God is doing and the value of a soul. And by the way, I did teach Luke when I was in Vermont, where Jesus goes across the sea for the one. And so that was a valuable lesson. And that really set me up for all the other adventures of my life, coming back to California, being returned to the surf industry, back to pro surfing, back to the Pipe Masters, serving with Pastor Chuck. I had to be sent away for half a decade to learn the value of one. And he who is the greatest in the kingdom is the servant of all.
Yeah. And and that is a beautiful story. And what a great reminder. And a word, anybody who's in, pastoral ministry, listening maybe, that is a word that we've got to take to heart, because everybody does that. You get up, you look out there, you're like, gosh, how come there's so many empty seats today? And then you're so preoccupied with that, you're not even focusing on the people that are in front of you.
It's easy to do.
Yeah, the sheep that Jesus has brought, that.
And not just for pastors, even if you're just a salesperson, you feel that way too. I mean, that's life.
Yes, right. So, but, when you came back from Vermont, you hadn't surfed much at all for quite a while.
10 years.
Yeah. And so, the thought of going back into pro surfing was kind of like a little bit far-fetched at that stage, because you weren't young anymore necessarily.
No, and at that time, 35 was way over the hill for pro surfing. This was before Kelly Slater was winning Pipeline at 50, right? So you're way past your prime at 35.
Exactly. But you come back and you actually win another world title. And that blew everybody's mind.
It was crazy.
It completely blew everybody's mind.
It was crazy. It was in Mexico at Puerto Escondido, the Mexican pipeline. And it was perfect timing because I trained for it. The year before, it was actually in Tavarua, the famous wave there in the South Pacific. I couldn't go because my mother-in-law had terminal cancer. We were there serving. I was guest speaking at different churches. You were in England at the time, of course. And I had to say no, which was disappointing. And then the next year, it was in Puerto Escondido. My mother-in-law had passed away. Our personal life was a bit more stable. And I went for it. And I trained. And I won it. And the classic thing was the famous Hawaiian pro surfer, Michael Ho, who we both know. He was there. And when I got to Mexico, I had to come a day late because I was committed to a wedding. I had a wedding I'd committed to. And they're going to start the contest without me being there. And the wind switched right before the contest started, so they canceled the contest. And then that same day I came late, and the wind switched offshore, which is the better conditions for surfing, if you don't know surf terminology. And the surf was like 15 feet imperfect. And I got out of my car, waxed up my board, went out there, and I caught the biggest tube-ride barrel, like when you're inside the wave, I caught in since Pipeline in the 80s. And I got spit out of the cannon. Michael Ho was on the beach, and the whole beach screamed and cheered. It was my first wave.
Yeah.
And then I won everything that week, and I went home a world champion. And Michael Ho, when I interviewed him like 7 years later for my movie, he's like, "Oh, Brad," I said, "Oh, holy man, is going to win this contest." He's all, oh, go home already, like that. You know, he said, Joey, I just knew. We all knew. The pastor shows up, hasn't served for 10 years, gets a perfect 10 on a warm-up wave, and that's it. It's over. And that's how it went. And I said to Michael Ho when he said that in 2004, I go, how do you even explain such things? Right? That's the mystery of God. I'm like, you know, who even knows? I can explain that. I don't know. But
now, did you get to keep that trophy at least?
I did.
Oh, good.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still it's the one that's in my room.
Okay, so fast forward. You win that, you come back, and then...
You came back.
I came back.
That's the key. You came back.
So I came back, and you left Vista, and I was still in Vista, and I come and visit you and so forth. But then I left Vista.
Yes.
And when I came back, I didn't go to Vista. I came to Costa Mesa. And so I came back to Costa Mesa. This year will be 25 years. So I came back. Cheryl came back literally. She came back for Christmas, or she came back January 1st of 2025. I didn't come back till March because I had to stay back in England and kind of, finish things up. So it was 2025 that I came back.
Wait. 2025?
2025. It was 2000.
We're 60 here. I didn't even blink. I know what he's saying.
It's 25 years ago. It was 2000 that I came back. And I had not been back for that long. I'm working alongside Pastor Chuck, and all of that. And so something happened where, hey, Joey, come on up and, let's team up again.
Well, here's the funny thing is I was the coach of Billabong junior program. I had all kinds of dog and pony shows, side hustles like you do when you're itinerant pastor. And Billabong had a 3-year offer on the table for me to run their entire program. This is after Bob Hurley had left Billabong to start Hurley. Yeah. And it was early December, and the Lord showed me that I was not to do the deal, but I was going back into full-time ministry, and I was to tell Billabong, no deal, and all bets are off. Mm-hmm. So I called my boss at the time, Graham Stapleberg, who's a believer, and I said, all bets are off. He's like, Joey, you have a mortgage. What are you going to do? How are you going to do this? I'm like, the Lord will provide. He's going to make it clear. But the Lord showed me I had to first say no to Billabong before I'd know what the yes was for the kingdom of God. So this is an important lesson of faith, because without faith, it's impossible to please God. Yep. And this happened in my life. So I said no to my monthly income and no to the 3-year plan. And yes to the Lord by faith that something was going to open up for full-time ministry. You called me from England, and it was 4 a.m. your time in England, and you called me, and you said, Joey, I'm coming back to California, and Chuck says I can build my team. I'd like you to be a part of my team. And that's how that happened. Mm-hmm. And then you did come back. That was mid-December. Right. I was never so happy to get a phone call from you. My wife's like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm pretty sure. You're a little less sure each day, right? When you're waiting on the Lord sometimes. But it all worked out. And then here's where God is able to do above and beyond all that you could think or ask in His church for His glory, Ephesians 3:20. Because, as you know, Raul Reese was teaching Thursday nights at that time. Mm-hmm. And he was done with Mark around March or April of 2000. Yep. And you and Chuck came up with the idea to give me the sanctuary to reach young people. I had done a ministry with Jeremy Camp. No one knew who he was. We'd done a prison ministry with Fred Clark down there in Vista at the Otay Mesa facility. And me and Jeremy hit it off right away. We're like, we get each other. We're like the sports guys, like we're just those guys. And we're Jesus sports guys. And me and Jeremy hit it off. And this is when he was still courting Melissa, his first wife. And her cancer was in remission. And I just felt like the Lord said, this is your worship leader. So God gave me Jeremy Camp there at Worship Generation, along with Charlo and Tim Chaddock, Bobby Brown. Scott Cunningham was around at that time, had just come in. But Jeremy was like the starting quarterback. And then Phil Wickham was 16 at the time. And I saw him in some Christian club, and I was like, this guy's really good. And I made him one of my worship leaders. So by October of 2000, so we'll be celebrating 25 years of Worship Generation just shortly after your 25-year anniversary. Yeah. We did a flyer, and we called the service Worship Generation. And the October flyer had Jeremy Camp. The November flyer had Phil Wickham. And, think about this. I said, Lord Jesus, I've had a cappella worshipers in Vermont, leaders. I played cassette tapes in a church plant in Virginia Beach. You know what I'm saying? So I'm back in California, like, Lord, please send me worship leaders. And He gave Joey Baran, Jeremy Camp, and Phil Wickham.
Wow.
Right? Oh, you can't make this stuff up. That's why I wrote a book. I mean, that's why I wrote a book. I just can't. Yeah, and like I say to Michael Ho, how can you even explain it?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't know what to say. But that happened there. And then the last thing was the coaching stuff.
Yeah. And so years and years and years ago, you just for our audience, of course, we've had so many conversations about so many things, but Joey's obviously he's an energetic guy, and you just have these moments where you just get like all filled with inspiration and faith and everything, and then and he's talking about the Olympics and surfing's going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to coach the Olympic team, and then you're just like, well, okay, we'll see about that. I mean, surfing's not even on the radar with the Olympics at this stage when these conversations are going on. But lo and behold, guess what? Joey ends up doing. So
yeah,
tell us about that whole deal.
So in 2007, after we had started the church Worship Generation with Chuck's blessing and your blessing down the street here in Fountain Valley, I got a phone call. Well, I had a morning devotion where the Lord put on my heart, he's going to open the door to Surf World again, to go back to the surf world.
Yeah.
I'd not kind of been in touch for quite a few years after I won the World Masters title and all that. And then I wrote it in my journal, like, God's going to open a door in surfing. I get to the church, and there's a phone message, first of all, from Mike Gerard. I've never heard this person before. It's like, hey, this is Mike so-and-so. I'm from the USA America Surfing Program, and we'd like to have you consider being our head coach. Wow. Press the phone for the next message. It's Mike Parsons, the famous pro surfer coach that you would know. He's like, Joey, this is Mike Parsons. We're looking for a new head coach, and I'd like you to consider it. The board had a meeting. We're approaching you to coach the U.S. national surf team, and we'd love to have you come coach them. Now, I listened to those messages. I went in the sanctuary at Shoreline Baptist over there in Fountain Valley. I said, Lord, you spoke to me this morning, and then you opened this door. Like, they're calling a pastor. Mm-hmm. This is the U.S. Olympic Surfing Program calling Pastor Joey, a Calvary Chapel pastor, to come be their coach. I'm like, this is crazy. And I prayed and fasted, and the board, we all said, let's do it. So I did it for a couple years. We went for the gold. We never got it. I was actually quite disappointed. We had some really good surfers, but we competed internationally. We got a silver, but that's when the Brazilians were all coming on, and they've stayed since then. So I did that, and then eventually we did my movie on my life story, as you know, Beyond the Dream, the movie. And so we stepped back, did all these evangelism things with Brian Jennings and his people walking on water, went to South Africa with people we love and all that. And England, we did Creation Fest. And then next thing I know, Great Britain asked me to be their coach. So I went and coached the Great Britain team at our World Championship, which was quite an adventure.
Yeah.
To be the California kid and coaching a foreign team.
Yeah.
I was like, this is just kind of different, walking in the parade with the Union Jack. Yeah, it's a different thing. I'm telling you, it's a little different, Then I go to Chile. The Lord says, learn Spanish. Then he opens the door to Chile. I go to Chile, and I coach a Chilean team for 3 years. Surfing becomes an Olympic sport. It's going to be in the 2020 Olympics. Mm. So I build the entire Olympic program for Team Chile. For 3 years, I'm going to Santiago, Viña del Mar, down there 4 or 5 times a year, coaching, training, administration, and then going to international competitions with the top Chilean surfers. And then I just start having grandkids, which we all know is like, that's a game changer. And so I had to realize I can't do Worship Generation, Olympic coaching, and grandkids. It's just too much. Chilean Olympic coaching. So I stepped back, I resigned, and then wouldn't you know, our good friend Greg Cruz calls me in 2017 saying, Joey, we need you back. And now it's an Olympic sport. So they brought me back to Team USA to be the coach. And I built the program a second time. We won the World Championship. We got a ton of money from sponsors, which we really needed to run the program and build an Olympic program. I did it for 2 years. And then in 2019, I just thought, I'm either going to be a full-time Olympic coach or I'm going to be the pastor of Worship Generation. Mm-hmm. It's like the Wizard of Oz. The Scarecrow's going like, they both required 50 hours a week. It was not sustainable. And I just thought, well, I'll kind of wrap this thought up with this, Brian. When I work with U.S. Olympic Surfing, because I just didn't do the USA Surf Team, I did the USOC. I went to Colorado Springs, Joe Gibbs Racing in Charlotte. I did a lot of elite level training as an Olympic coach to prepare the sport and the athletes to go to the Olympics. And one of the things I had to do, I did like an 80-page paper, like a college term thesis paper on reverse engineering how to have 2 Americans win gold medal in LA 2028. I had to reverse engineer LA 2028 and what we're going to do for the next 10 years to win gold. And as I was doing this whole paper, I thought, you go for the gold. Because what does Team USA do? They go for the gold. And I just kept coming back to 1 Corinthians. They run for a perishable crown, but we run for an imperishable crown. I thought, I've never thought that much about my life 10 years ahead, but if I lived 10 more years, do I want to do it being a pastor, tending the flock, or do I want to do it being the coach of U.S. Olympic surfing and going for nothing personal, temporal gold? And I determined that I wanted to go for eternal gold. And so I stepped back, I resigned, I retired. Brett Simpson, of course, took my place. They did win gold in 2021, a year later, or a year after the scheduled Olympics because of COVID. Carissa Moore won gold. And then last Olympics, they won it again. So Team USA has won gold 2 Olympics in a row, and they're all getting ready for 2028. And, they're still not sure if it's Lowers or Huntington, but all that to say, it kind of goes back to being on the beach of Pipeline in the pouring rain.
Yeah.
When I really thought about my life projecting to being the age 68, who do I want to be and what do I want to be doing? And I used to determine it's an honorable thing to coach an Olympic sport. Coaches are the best. They get the least appreciation, put in the most work. But in the end, I just decided, like you decided in the autumn of 87, Joey Baran's called to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And I just decided, as much as I love being a coach, even an Olympic coach, Team USA, I love tending the flock. And I'm called to be a pastor. And the goal I'm going for is an imperishable crown. And he's no fool who gives it that which you cannot keep to gain that which you cannot lose. And I'm all about eternity and the kingdom. And I hope they win double gold in LA 2028. I might even be there watching it. It might even be in Huntington. I'll call Brett Simpson and look for the VIP pass.
Yes,
right?
for sure.
But all that to say, I'm just all about Jesus because I'm about beyond the dream.
Yeah. Amen. Man, thanks for coming.
Yeah. So
Thanks for texting me and saying, hey, we need to do something.
yeah, we're going. Brian, you're going for the gold.
I'm going for the gold.
Brian, you're going for the gold.
Yes.
We are going for
indeed.
the gold.
The gold. Streets of gold.
Buy from me gold refined in the fire, Jesus said.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing.
The crown that's imperishable.
Yeah.
Imperishable. And by the way, we run to win. We're not just running for the prize.
Yeah.
All run, but we run to win. So
Yeah.
that's our best effort from here to eternity for the glory of Christ.
Not just a participation trophy.
That's right. I mean, I've gotten some of those. They're not near. No. And let me tell you, there's a difference between bronze and silver and gold too, by the way. We go for the gold because,
That's right.
as I say, in King Jesus, with Jesus done, I'm not hoping for victory. I'm coming from victory. So let's go big. King Jesus.
Our guest today on Pastor's Perspective, Pastor Joey Baran. You can find out more about him on his website, joeybaran.com. You can purchase his book there. It's called Beyond the Dream. It's also available for purchase on Amazon and here at the chapel store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. His church, Worship Generation in Fountain Valley. What are the service times, Joey?
We are Saturdays at 6 p.m., and then we are Tuesdays at 7 p.m., and that Saturday service is preceded by me being on K-Wave at 5:30.
That's right.
We're on K-Wave on Sunday mornings at 6:30. And then whenever Brian or Charlo's done, we come on after
Yes.
I always say after those guys.
Yes. It's supposed to be about 12:30, but it doesn't always work out that way.
we go a little long sometimes.
That's okay. So again, joeybaran.com, worshipgeneration.com. Get this book, Beyond the Dream. God bless you guys. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.